I'm a big believer you follow your passion, you really believe in what you're doing, you believe in what work that you do, that everything else works out. You worry about so much other stuff, make sure that you're following your passion and the rest will work out.
Welcome to the Build It to Billions podcast, where we guide successful entrepreneurs and investors on their journey from millions to billions. And we believe the key to scaling and compounding your wealth starts every single day with the mindset and practice of stewardship over ownership and applying billionaire biblical principles. Each and every day, we try to bring on some of the best entrepreneurs, millionaires and billionaires, where they share their ideas and secrets with us so that we can all scale our companies, scale our businesses, scale our life to make a bigger impact for MVPs. My name is Brett Swartz, and I'm excited to be the host today. Our guest is from the Boston area of Massachusetts, and he is a part of an amazing company that we're going to be talking about here. So he's a CEO, and their focus is basically building elite workplace environments. Okay, and that's what we're going to be talking about today. And so this guest is the leader in enabling vibrant hybrid workplaces, and is the first and their company is the first workplace platform to put people before places. Please welcome to the show with me, Mr. Micah Remley. Micah, how are you doing?
Hey, great, Brett. Thanks for having me today. I appreciate it. It's great to be on the show.
Yeah, absolutely. And for our listeners getting to know you for the first time, would you give us just a little bit more about your story and your current focus?
Yeah, sure. So this is, I've always been worked in growth startups. So VC funded growth startups. I've been in, this is my third one now. That entrepreneurial part of building, especially in this day and age, software companies is really interesting to me. And what I loved about Robin Power, which I took over as CEO about 3.5 years ago, was really building. I was a CEO myself then, and I looked at the challenges of building a successful company in this hybrid work world where people are in the office sometimes, they're at home sometimes. And what I saw was there's really no good solutions in helping to solve that. So I joined Robin Power. And what I really love about that growth journey for organizations is building companies. It's just like building anything else in your life. It's a lot of hard work. It takes it's a lot of gray hairs in my head from it, but it also is a lot of fun. And if I look at the most rewarding parts of my career, it's always been that building and growth mode. And especially from relatively small scale to large scale, I love that in-between piece there. And that's where I've been focused for most of my career.
Fantastic, Micah. And diving right into the show, right, which is building an elite workplace. What would you say is the first secret to doing just that?
Yeah, I think the first secret is to define what you're trying to accomplish and what the culture of your organization is. So when we think about workplaces, what we often have found is pandemic happened, everyone sent all their employees home. And then they have come back with a workplace strategy that lacks a lot of intentionality. They either said, all right, everyone just come back now because that's what we want to do, or they just said, all right, everyone work from home now because that's sort of easy and that's what employees want. And what we found is there's just not a lot of intentionality there. And I'll describe something. Hybrid work, by the way, is how most companies are managing their workforces nowadays, which is the expectation that you spend some time in the office and you spend some of the time working from home. But if I were to say those two words, hybrid work, to most employees, if I were to say that to employees, they would say, okay, hybrid work means I get to choose when I come to the office, which, by the way, the stats show I'm not going to show up very often at all. I'm going to show up once, twice a month, maybe that, if that. If you talk to employers, the management teams, and you said hybrid work, they'd say, hey, you're in the office 2, 3 days a week, 4 days a week, but you have some flexibility to work from home when you need to. That fundamental departure, that chasm, still exists 5 years after the pandemic, which is amazing. So when you think about all the intentionality people put around building businesses, they're still putting very little intentionality around what they want their workplace culture to be and what they want their workforce to look like, which is pretty incredible. So luckily we have the pleasure to work with a whole bunch of organizations that are thinking intentionally about that, which gives us a lot of takeaways to how you build truly exceptional organizations by thinking deeply about how your most important asset, which is your talent, what you want that workplace to look like, and how you develop a culture of success at your organization based on what your workplace is like.
Yeah, I love that. So clearly defining what you're trying to accomplish, right?
Yep.
How do you have strategy around if you don't know where you're aiming, right? And number two, having a lot of intentionality behind it, not just taking it for granted because people are finally getting back to, it's been a couple of years now, but getting back to what it was before, although things have always changed. So a lot of things there. So let's just focus like a laser on the top 2 to 3 takeaways that you found that the best businesses are doing for their workforce.
Yeah. So first is, people, first of all, there's so much water cooler talk and so much back and forth, obviously in the media and everything else, about what the right workplace policy is. Should people be back in the office 5 days a week? Should they be in the office 3 days a week? What should it be? And once again, this depends on what you want your workplace culture to be, what type of employees you're trying to recruit, what type of work you're doing. What's interesting is we look deeply at the academic. There's a whole bunch of peer-reviewed academic research around this, which hopefully take out a fair amount of the bias associated with any conversation on this subject. The academic research clearly shows that 2.5 days is optimal, which actually isn't very surprising, right? So it's some alone time at home, heads down work, the ability to not have to commute, good balance to be able to provide, to balance with your personal stuff, but also that time in person in work, in person in the office. So the academic research clearly shows that. It shows a balance is actually the right place. So when we see the best organizations are typically finding some balance in there. Whether it be, hey, you're in the office most of the time, but you have some flexibility to work from home when you need to, hey, you might be home more of the time, but you're definitely in the office with your colleagues sometimes. We find that on that spectrum, they're finding balance there, where they really are having good in person and they're having good at-home time too. And I'll give you an example. So this is a lot of people think, okay, well, what type of employees does this rely to? And I'm going to tell you a story real quickly. We're working with a financial services company. It was in professional services, I want to say. And they had an entire intern class fail over the course of a summer. And what's funny, so during the summer, all of the partners, they go and they work out of the Hamptons or wherever the heck they go work out of, right? And they had an intern class that came in, this was a couple of years ago, and while most people were remote, the whole intern class failed. And they went back and they looked at all the data. They said, all right, the schools these interns were hired from, nobody got promoted to junior associate at all. And they couldn't figure out why. They looked at all the demographic information, nothing pointed to it. And the only thing they found was they weren't in person together. They weren't getting that information exchange, especially to this group of employees that was literally the future of the company. That this company depends on that promotion cycle of people coming up from associate all the way up to partner. So they had to change the workplace policy for everyone, because sometimes we think, oh, it's just the junior people that need to be in. That actually wasn't the problem. The problem is the senior people weren't in the office too, and that information exchange wasn't happening. And this gets back to that intentionality part. What are you trying to accomplish? And how do you make sure that your workplace and your company culture reflects that? And I think one of the reasons I joined Robin was I found it was really hard to build company culture at a remote organization. So that's why, and one of the reasons in-person work is really important to me personally. But the data proves that out too, if we look at the academic data.
Okay, so this is key, right? So the information exchange, mentors to mentees, making sure that it's happening, right? And right, if they're disconnected, physically in an office space, obviously that can be a complete disconnect, and it was for this group. 2.5 days is optimal, makes sense, some good balance. Okay, so what else besides those two things? Anything else that comes to mind that the top companies are figuring out?
So here's what's really interesting. So there was a great research project on the importance of in-person work, and they found a couple really interesting things, one of which I'll focus on right now, which is if you sit within 25 feet, it's got to be within 25 feet of a high performer, you get a 15% performance boost on your own performance. So what's really interesting, there's two reasons why. So one of the reasons was, as I just described before, hey, I'm here at the information exchange. Brett, you're on a call. I hear how you're making a pitch. I hear how you're doing stuff. I'm learning some from kind of general osmosis from you. So that's why I get a performance boost. But guess what the other reason was? There's another reason you get a performance boost. Guess what it is?
Not sure.
Peer pressure.
Mm.
So Just like going to the gym, if you're next to someone who's working out really hard, guess what? You're a little more likely to work out really hard, which is why a lot of people like to go to the gym rather than work out in their home basements, right? Well, the exact same thing applies to work, right? That if you're working near somebody else who's working really hard, then you're probably going to give a little bit of extra effort. You see them staying late, you hear them jamming away on the phone all day. You're like, all right, well, I got to better pick up my performance a little bit too. So those two things are really important. Once again, this is important context. So when we think about building successful businesses, the environment which you're in is really, really important. That if you sit and you're with and you associate with people that are high performing, you end up being better performing too. And here's the other interesting part. So in this study, they looked at low performers because that would be the natural question. What about low performers? Guess what? Sit next to a low performer, it does. It drags down your performance. You get very similar decline in performance. And to remove the effect of low performers, you know what they did? They moved them to a far corner of the office. As soon as I moved them to a far corner of the office, it stopped having that impact on people. So this idea of who you associate with, both physically in the office and in general, really does make a difference. And once again, the research bears this out. And this has back to from workplace design to just who you're hanging out with when you're trying to build an organization. All of those things are really important.
Wow, you simplified it, right? That makes total sense once you say it, but it's not necessarily intuitive. So right, even this is 25 feet. I love that. You get a 15% performance boost, and make sure you're measuring out there how close you are to the top performers. Same thing, make sure you're measuring if you're next to low performers. Make sure you're getting some distance there. That makes total sense. Okay, so that's really neat. So let's maybe move to some application and like how Robin Power, by the way, robinpower.com, you can look up Micah and what his team's doing there. Let's talk about how you guys are solving these things and some unique things that you're bringing to the table to help companies, have an elite, workplace environment.
Yeah. So what we found is that, so once again, we know employees want more time at home. Employers want more time in the office. It's trying to find the balance between the two. And what we see is that there's a lot of friction. So before the pandemic, if you went on vacation for a long weekend, took 4 days off, then came back into the office, it was a little disorienting. It's like, all right, what are my passwords again? Where do I go? What do I do? You're out of the rhythm of that. And of course, now that's what we're asking employees to do every single week. And so what's changed is changed the way people think about workplaces too. So if we look at workplaces over the past 5 years, a few things have happened to them. So first of all, once again, some companies, and these get the headlines, have returned to the office full time. Those are still not quite the norm. The norm definitely is a hybrid, somewhere in the middle, and the data shows that out. But workplaces have gotten smaller. So we've shrunk the size of the office for the most part because people are only coming in a couple days a week. They're only coming in intermittently. But what we've seen for most organizations is they treat the office the same way that they treated it before. So people are just coming a few days a week. So we looked at it because we have thousands of customers around the world. And we looked at the data set. What we found was, I had this question, so how many people come into the office and then spending most of the day on video calls? So they're actually not working with their coworkers in the office. And when we looked at it, what we found was 50% of meetings that take place in a conference room. So somebody's actually gone and reserved a conference room. 50% of meetings that go through that, they actually are just one person in the conference room on a video call with somebody else. So you've made them come into the office, and this is the complaint. Completely like, hey, you made me come into the office, and I sat. Then we looked at the other data because we can see where people are sitting and everything. We said, how many people come in and sit alone? 20% of people come into the office and sit alone. They sit by themselves. So once again, I ask you this question of, all right, well, no wonder employees are pushing back on this. So what the best companies do is they really seek to solve that problem. So clearly our technology is the foundation to help solve those problems. They understand back to what are the culture they're trying to build. They understand what do we want the office for. They do things like team days, by the way, are really important ones. So what days are the entire team or maybe specific teams, sales or marketing or legal, whatever teams make sense. What days do they come into the office? They're making sure that in-person meetings are happening on those days, or client-facing meetings are happening in those days we're in the office. They're getting very specific about that. And then clearly in this situation, our platform helps power all of those interactions. So that's the role that we play in it. But once again, it starts with, hey, what do we want to accomplish, rather than saying, okay, everyone come back in 2 days a week, 3 days a week, and then people come in, you don't get any additional results, then you wonder why you're doing it in the first place. Employees push back on it. And I think this is why we've seen 3 years of all this tug of war of people saying, hey, we want people back in the office more often, but then they don't come back. We see, by the way, we have some of the most innovative companies in the world. I won't name them here, use Robin as a platform, and they are really good at what I just described. They are deeply intentional about what they want the office to accomplish. They're highly focused on how people use it. The design of the office is such, the operations of the office are really designed to support the growth of the business. And it's been a key part of their rapidly growing businesses.
This is so good. And you put it so well. I'm going to give you an analogy. I want you to think about this, Micah, right? It's like tax, okay? In fact, I don't think Americans mind paying tax when we know that it's being stewarded wisely and for good purposes and good causes. And I think the other side, the workers, like, hey, I don't mind coming to the office if I feel like my time is going to be stewarded well with human interaction, one-on-one meetings, an intentional environment that leadership is creating for us as team members to be able to connect in a real authentic way. Then yeah, I'll maybe want to come in the office even more because it's great. But if I'm just coming here and doing the same thing that I'd be doing at home, but I had to sit in traffic for an hour back and forth, like, what's the point? In fact, I'm now deflated. Is that what you're saying?
That's exactly right. So that's one side of it. And the other piece is I used the gym analogy before, which is, hey, you know what? It might be more comfortable for me to sit at home on my couch and go use the treadmill for 10 minutes in the morning. But if I go to the gym and then I go through the effort of driving and then I'm on the treadmill for an hour because I went there and I work out even harder and come like, in the long run, I might be better off for that. So there's a little bit of both aspects actually occur here.
Okay, this is good. All right, so now let's talk about specifically now your solutions, right? Okay, so you've talked about the problem, the challenges, right? The mindset shift that needs to shift, the intentionality that needs to shift. Now let's get really down to practical. So what does robinpower.com do? And give us some of the tools and some of the resources that you guys provide.
Yeah, so we're really a digital platform for the office. So we allow people to help so there's two main constituencies that use Robin's. We have hundreds of thousands of users that use our product every single week. And so it's funny that we look a lot like a consumer app in that way, even though we sell to businesses. So what it allows transparency into all the problems we have. So for employees, they can see who else is coming to the office. They can see what resources are available to them, what's going on. They can order services. Let's say they need lunch or catering for a meeting. They can do all of that within Robin. They can book desks. They can book resources. They can use other things. More importantly, they can book space for the teams. And once again, coordinate on that. All right, I talked about sitting next to somebody who's a high performer. So I can see where my favorites are sitting. I can sit with them and make sure that I have a space with them on those, once again, a few days a week where I'm coming to the office if I'm in a hybrid office. On the flip side, what's changed for the modern office, which has been a really big change. So before the pandemic, people went into the office because they had to. Now people come into the office, back to what you were just describing. It's because they want to, probably as some sort of workplace policy, but most organizations want to make the office someplace where people want to attend. So what we've seen is this rise of the concierge around the office. So really, how do I make sure that we have the right atmosphere in place? Because what are you competing with? You're competing with people's houses. So you have people, they can sit at house. I have a very comfortable place. I have a place on the couch, or as I was just discussing before. The kitchen's 10 feet away. You got all my food that I want right there and everything else. So that's obviously very comfortable. So the office has to compete with that. So to the people that are running the office, we provide that suite of tools. Just like any concierge would have in a hotel or something, we give them the suite of tools to be able to provide that incredible experience to the employee. So it's really two-sided. So where are people sitting? What services do they need? How do I communicate with them? How do I make sure I run all those operations? Who's visiting the office today? And I keep track of all of that. And we automate a whole bunch of those things too. So we make it, usually folks that are running the office are kind of running around with their hair on fire because they have so many different things going on at one time. We provide tools to make their lives much, much easier, automate a bunch of the tasks that they were doing. So that way they can focus more on, we talked about culture and intentionality. If you're being reactive all the time, you can't do that, which is why I think most organizations have this problem around the workplace. But once you take away a bunch of that reactive stuff, then you can start being proactive and provide that real amazing workplace experience. So our platform, we have a digital workplace platform. We help both those constituents get the most out of their workplace.
Got it. And Micah Remley, everybody, robinpower.com, robinpower.com, if you want to learn how to build a digital platform for your office, for coordination, for work relationships, for meetings, a concierge type of setting and environment that is going to serve your team members amazing, help them build deep connections. I think it makes a ton of sense, and I think it is absolutely needed, and most people don't even think about the tools that could be available for this. They think about softwares on their computers or their apps on their phones or AI automation. Speaking of AI, what's your thought on AI, and how does this play into this role of the building an elite office or workplace environment?
Yeah. So first of all, I'll talk about two levels of AI. Actually, we can talk about three, but I'll talk about a few. So first of all, I think that the rise of AI will make in-person interaction even more and more important over the coming years. This idea of I'm talking to an actual human, as our inboxes and everything else continue to get filled with spam as created by AI, that seems very human-like. You see the latest scams coming out, AI video calls getting tricked into sending, what was the one last week, $25 million to the wrong place, using an AI video scam associated with it. We're going to see that stuff happen more often. It's going to, once again, really increase the importance for in-person work. This is going to be the funny thing about AI. As more stuff moves digital, it's going to make it more likely that we're going to need in-person interactions. It's the very basis of the human experience. So I think that's one thing. The second thing is we can use AI to automate a bunch of stuff that we just described. So a bunch of people's pain points in the office, some of the things that we just discussed is making sure a whole bunch of processes people around the office. When people talk about AI, usually it's, hey, I get excited about an assistant that can do some of the administrative stuff that I have to do. That someone could just take care of that. That way I can focus on high value things. We view that as that's how we can bring AI to the workplace. So a whole bunch of things that people don't want to have to do. They just want to come in, be able to do their job. And AI assistants and solutions like Robin can take a whole bunch of that stuff off their table, from what am I having to lunch today to making sure that my meetings are set up correctly in the right places all of the time. I'm sitting with the right group of people, that if I have people coming to visit, we can just automate all of that process so they have the right security access credentials to come into the office. AI can actually just automate a whole bunch of those things. So that's the exciting part of AI, and make us all a lot more efficient at the end of the day. That's what gets excited about AI.
Very cool. I couldn't agree more. And it's really neat to see where AI takes workplace environment, takes efficiency. And you're right. It's going to be a pullback that is scary to think about. Wire fraud is rampant, and now it's the technology to be able to create videos around that is scary to think about. So make sure you're careful out there. And then, I think a number of things, right? I think of like 2FA technology with a third-party source, and then having, multiple parties verify to one source versus just one-to-one, right? Yeah. Where you would, I know the way we do it here at Capital Gains Tax Solutions is like, and oftentimes we'll have the attorney, we'll have the financial advisor, we'll have me, the trustee, we'll have the client, we'll have and going to the source of who's sending it, and independently verifies through multiple sources versus just one-to-one. Right. That's really, really important. So, okay. All right. Speaking of that, you mentioned you exited some companies. Part of what we do here at Capital Gains Tax Solutions is we help people build capital gains tax exit plans. So when they exit, they're not getting crushed with 20, 30, 40, 50% of their proceeds just being taxed. Yeah. So you're in Boston, Massachusetts, New York, New Jersey, California. I call it Taxifornia, some of the highest in the country. So I'm curious, what's been your biggest frustration when you've exited, whether it be, stock or whether it be interest in a company, and having capital gains taxes? Any feedback for the entrepreneurs listening out there?
Yeah, sure. So I think being thoughtful about it, and it's hard to do, right? I mean, this is the thing. It's really easy to talk about exit strategies while you're building a business, but when you're building a business, you're very much in the fog of war. And I think that's the hard thing. So it's very easy when advisors and everything, oh, well, looking back, hindsight's 2020. You should have done this. You should have done that. You should have done all these other things. But the fact of the matter is, I've really always been focused on building the business first. And I find that people kind of worried about the ancillary stuff. Typically, they're missing the main prize, which is focus on building the business. So my always clear focus is building the business first and not think about those other things. And I've come up the right side of that sometimes from a tax situation. Some come up on the wrong side where it's like, oh, geez, have I done some common sense things along the way? And I think to your point, think about what those common sense things are. I mean, there's things like obviously QSBC, there's ways for founders to think about these things, or angel investors, or whoever that might be to think about these things. There is obviously early exercise of options, exercising options at the right time. Once I've been lucky enough in some situations to turn up the right side of that, but there is risk, and I've turned up on the wrong side of that too. So once again, it's very easy for folks to think about looking back, hindsight being 2020, oh, we woulda, shoulda, coulda. But the fact of the matter is, when you're building a business, because you're in that fog of war, you don't know what the outcomes are going to be. If you knew what the outcomes are going to be, then that'd be really easy to come up with that plan. But when you don't, then you might trigger alternative minimum tax because you exercise a bunch of options, but then the options are below water or underwater down the road, and they're worthless. And then you just, I mean, there's a whole bunch of scenarios you see play out across people. So I think to your question is just having good advice along the way, thinking about what the potential outcomes are. At the end of the day, a strategy there's some risk tolerance associated with it too, that you typically, there are no free rides there. So what's your risk tolerance associated with it? That's been my take. And I wish I could say, hey, I've navigated that perfectly. Like I said, Brad, I've definitely probably done some things that, I should have done more of that, or things like, yeah, I did that right. And certainly some things that I probably didn't do right at all. But
No, I think it's a great perspective. I think you spot on when you say that, Micah, that you're in the fog of war, right? And you're building the company to exit or building it just to build it because this is your passion, and you're not building a capital gains tax exit plan. In fact, we wrote a book called Building a Capital Gains Tax Exit Plan for that exact point. It's like, as an encouragement to entrepreneurs like yourself and everyone who's listening, it's like you literally build something for 5, 10, 15, 20 years, blood, sweat, and tears. And if you knew that 20 to 50% of it is going to be, the profits are going to be crushed, right? You might spend just 5 hours building a capital gains tax exit plan. And that's really the unique thing that we do, Micah, is we help people build this within 5 hours. And it can be during their escrow. It can be during they're under contract, right? We do need to set it up prior to the final closing, but it doesn't require, 5-year, C Corp, having to have all that and do all these things. Like literally you could be like, I'm selling, it's $100 million exit. I've got 30 days and I've got to set something up. I'm going to get crushed. And that's when we come in, and that's why we love it, because it's such a flexible strategy for the entrepreneur. If people want to learn more, you can go to capitalgainstaxsolutions.com. It works for stock, Bitcoin, business sales, real estate, any asset of any kind. Just needs to be multi-million kind of type of exit, larger exits, capitalgainstaxsolutions.com. That being said, Mr. Micah, are you ready for the lightning round?
Ready for the lightning round.
All right. Knowing what you know now, if you can go back to your 25-year-old self with one gold nugget, make sure to tell yourself to do.
Golden nugget. I'd say can follow your passion, right? Always follow your passion. I'm a big believer. You follow your passion. You really believe in what you're doing. You believe in believe in the work that you do, that everything else works out. You worry about so much other stuff. Make sure that you're following your passion, and the rest will work out.
Absolutely love it. Question number 2, what's the number one book you've recommended or gifted the most in the past year?
All right. So I've read a number of them. I'd say probably Going Infinite, which is Michael Lewis's book, Sam Bankman-Fried and crypto. You're just mentioning crypto. That probably is it. That, and tied with The Wide Sea, which is by Hampton Sides, and it's the tale of Captain Cook's journey through the Pacific when he discovered the Hawaiian Islands. So that those two. So one business, one more pleasure.
Okay, awesome. By the way, I'm in Captain Cook Cove, so I got to read the book now. I didn't know.
Yeah, if you read The Wide Sea, it's fantastic.
It's such a great place. If you've never been to Captain Cook Cove in Kona, Hawaii, go there. There's dolphins, especially. You can't touch dolphins. And they don't even want you to swim with them anymore. But back in the day, you could, and it was incredible. It was like 70 of them, so you can look from the shoreline. But
I've never been there. I've got to go there. All right, this is a reason to go there.
Yeah. So next question: what are you most curious about?
what am I most curious about? Right now, from a business standpoint, deeply curious about AI. What people don't realize is it came out two plus years ago now with OpenAI and ChatGPT, and people sort of thought about generative AI a lot. The advancements made in the past 6 months are actually pretty unbelievable and far outweigh what happened 2+ years ago. And how quickly the technology is moving is, it's pretty incredible. The adoption curve of it is unbelievable. So just trying to keep up with the latest advancements there, which will fundamentally change how we all live and work over the next couple decades in ways that we're even just beginning to understand right now. It's pretty crazy.
Absolutely crazy. Yep. Which leads to the next question. Number one way that you're using ChatGPT.
So we're using it definitely for, well, not ChatGPT, but I'll put in generative AI in general. We are using, I use it personally for all the stuff that everyone else uses it for, so I won't go to that. Learning about new things, by the way, is super interesting. So I love that about learning. You can just say, hey, describe to me about something. Like, I love that aspect of it. But that personal front, we're using it significantly for coding, for software development. And once again, the advancements there recently have been incredible. So we've really driven company-wide adoption. It has dramatically increased our productivity across the organization, especially from a software development standpoint. And this is where some of the recent advancements have really made changes.
Cool. Is there a particular, ChatGPT or a particular one that you're using for that that's helpful?
Yeah, we're using a tool called Cursor, and Cursor is, I'm not a paid spokesman at all for them at all, but we're using a tool called Cursor. There's some others out there that I hear good things about too, but it definitely has very significantly increased our productivity. Awesome. We do some other tools before. It's been a huge step up. That's why I talk about the kind of those advancements. Cool. It's been interesting to see.
Cool. Thanks for sharing that. Next question. Number one leadership quote or theme that you strive to live by.
Oh, geez. I normally have some great ones in mind. Leadership quote.
Or a theme. It could be just a kind of general theme.
Yeah. I try to definitely lead by example in general. Yeah. I try to lead from the front. That's my normal theme. I try not to ask other people to do things that I wouldn't want to do myself personally. Mm-hmm. Definitely leading by example is definitely a leadership theme for me.
Phenomenal. And this leads to the last question. And Mike, I want to just also thank you for being on the show, sharing your wisdom, your passion for workplace, building an elite workplace for team members, for management, for leaders, for entrepreneurs. Keep doing what you're doing. This is the last question, and we'll wrap it up. After all your success, helping all the people you've helped, how do you best stay centered in your values and stay encouraged to charge forward to reach even higher heights?
Yeah, that's great. I think, once again, we talked about doing things you're passionate about. I think that's one of the ways to stay grounded. Second is making sure that passion is directed in different places. I think people get single focused. So I believe deeply in volunteer work, making sure that giving back to community in various ways. I think it's really important. You get kind of surrounded by folks that are like you, and make sure that you're spreading, making sure that your network continues to be people that aren't necessarily like you, I think is really, really important, and that you stay centered in your values. It's really easy to lose your values as you continue to get older and have some successes and everything else. And I think making sure you stay grounded is really, really important.
Awesome. Hey, Michael, again, thank you for being on the show. For our listeners who want to get in touch with you, could you remind them one last time what's the best place for them to find you?
robinpower.com. Thank you very much.
Perfect. Thanks, Mike. And also thank you to all the listeners and viewers who are who stuck with us today. And here at Build to Billions podcast and YouTube channel, also Capital Gains Tax Solutions podcast and YouTube channels. We are here on the journey with you to scale from millions to billions so we can give more, all of it away. We want to encourage you to take this episode and implement the strategies, the wisdom that Micah is talking about, or even just reach out to them to see if they can help your company build an elite workplace environment for your team. For those who have a large exit, who have massive capital gains taxes. We also want to encourage you to go to capitalgainstaxsolutions.com, pick up the book, Building a Capital Gains Tax Exit Plan. Don't get caught paying 20 to 50% of your proceeds in tax when you could have spent 5 hours with our team to build out a plan that it could execute to help you build your next company or invest into your next real estate property, or maybe even just get a truly passive income coming in that can replace and allow you to retire. Please go to capitalgainstaxsolutions.com if you're interested in that. Thank you so much for listening or watching. Please share this with someone you could also benefit, and we'll talk to you soon. Bye now.